Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about a military strike that on the surface was all about drugs. But what if it was really about something else? Something way more valuable. We're talking about oil.
All right, let's just jump right in. We've got a major event, the U.S. hitting Venezuela with a surprise military strike. Now, you always get the official story, right? But what we're digging into today is what really happened. What was the actual motive behind it all?
So picture this. It's January 2nd, 2026, the middle of the night in Caracas, Venezuela's capital city, and then completely out of the blue, bam! U.S. forces unleash this massive, intense military strike.
And what came out in the first few hours was just pure chaos. Imagine at least 7 huge blasts lighting up the night sky. These were precision strikes hitting military bases and what they call strategic targets. The city was thrown into confusion. Destruction everywhere. And the really scary part, nobody knew how many people were hurt or killed, civilian or military. It was a total black box.
But here's the twist. The bombing, that wasn't even the main show. It was a massive diversion. Because while all that chaos was unfolding on the ground, a highly trained U.S. Delta Force team was carrying out a completely different, secret mission. Their goal? To grab President Nicolás Maduro and his wife and get them out of the country. A classic bait and switch.
Okay, so you've got this massive, shocking military operation. How in the world do you explain that to the rest of the planet? What's the official line?
Well, they didn't wait long. The answer came just a few hours later. At 9 a.m. Eastern Time, boom, an indictment is unsealed in New York. And it's against President Maduro and the First Lady. The charges are no joke either. We're talking narco-terrorism and conspiracy. So there you have it. The whole thing gets neatly packaged as a major move in the war on drugs.
But you gotta ask yourself, does that really track? Does it make sense? A full-on aerial bombing in a mission to capture a foreign leader, all for drug charges? I mean, it seems a little extreme, doesn't it? It makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, something else was the real driver here.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we have to go back in time a bit. Because this attack, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. Nope. There was a very clear, very deliberate buildup of tension and military action in the months leading right up to it.
And when I say escalation, I mean it was dramatic. Check this out. It all kicks off in August 2025. The U.S. starts moving a huge military force into the Caribbean. We're talking the biggest since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then the attacks begin. Between September and the end of the year, they sink 34 ships off the coast, killing 115 people. And the official reason for every single one? You guessed it, fighting drug trafficking.
But if you look closely at that pattern of destruction, there's something that just doesn't fit. A really important anomaly. A little breadcrumb that leads us down a completely different path. One that has absolutely nothing to do with a war on drugs.
And this is it. This is the key. You have all these boats, these supposed drug runners being blown out of the water. But then, 2 other ships are handled completely differently. On 2 separate dates in December, U.S. forces come across 2 Venezuelan oil tankers, and they don't sink them, they seize them, they take them. So the big question is, why? Why destroy dozens of ships but very carefully capture the ones carrying black oil?
And right there, that single decision, to seize the oil tankers, that's what cracks this whole story open. It points to a massive economic motive. This is where we stop talking about drugs and start talking about something else entirely, natural resources.
Okay. To really get why this is such a big deal, you need to know one absolutely crucial fact. A fact that, honestly, a lot of people forget. Venezuela is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on planet Earth. That's right, number 1. More than Saudi Arabia, more than anyone. And here's the rub. For decades, all that oil has been basically locked away from the U.S. It started back in 1998 when Hugo Chavez nationalized the entire industry. Then you layer on 2 decades of U.S. sanctions, and the result is that this massive ocean of oil has been almost completely inaccessible to American companies and the American market.
So, when you put it all together, a different picture starts to emerge. One where the whole war on drugs thing wasn't the real reason at all. It was just a convenient excuse, a smokescreen for a much older, much bigger geopolitical prize: getting control of Venezuela's unbelievable oil wealth.
Now, this idea, this lens for looking at the conflict, it's not just a one-off theory for Venezuela. It's actually part of a much bigger framework that historians and political scientists use to understand conflicts all over the world,
throughout history, and it has a name.
It's called fossil imperialism. Sounds kind of academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's the theory that a country's endless hunger for fossil fuels, for oil and gas, can become the main driver of its foreign policy, that it can push a nation to intervene, sometimes violently, in other countries, all to make sure it has access to those resources.
And when you look at it that way, through the lens of fossil imperialism, the attack on Venezuela suddenly doesn't seem so random. It looks like, well, like the latest chapter in a very long story. Think about it. U.S. interventions in the Persian Gulf in the 80s and 90s, the Iraq War in 2003. The theory argues that there's a clear pattern here. When the oil is threatened, the military gets involved.
So, according to this theory, what's the endgame here? It's pretty straightforward, really. You get rid of Maduro, and you help install a new government. A friendly government, one that would be more than happy to roll out the red carpet for American corporations and throw open the doors to those massive oil fields for giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron.
All right, so let's pull all this together. What's the big takeaway? What does it all mean? If we start looking at this conflict, and maybe others, not just as a political squabble, but as a battle for energy, a modern clash of empires.
Well, the conclusion here is pretty powerful. It actually connects two of the biggest conversations we're having on the planet right now. It suggests that moving away from fossil fuels isn't just about stopping climate change, as important as that is. It reframes it as a matter of war and peace. In this view, every solar panel, every wind turbine, it's not just a win for the environment, it's a step toward a world where we don't have to fight over these resources anymore.
And that's where we'll leave it, with a final thought for you to chew on. If there's any truth to this idea of fossil imperialism, what other conflicts around the world, both now and in the past, suddenly look different? What happens when we stop looking at them through the usual lens of just politics or ideology, and instead see them as part of humanity's relentless and often violent search for energy?